Hi folks, welcome back to the Retrospective. This is a podcast where Peter, my co-host,
Hey.
and I, Jeremy, we explore the world of engineering leadership and engineering management. And today we're going to be tackling, I think, one of our hardest subjects yet. Probably one of the hardest things that we've all had to face or will face in managing people. It's something that can give you sleepless nights and stress and all sorts of things. So thank you, Peter, for bringing this interesting topic. Tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, we're gonna let someone go today. It's you're right. I would even say it's not one of the hardest. It's the hardest thing a manager needs to do because you're significantly impacting someone's life. Your goal before this point was to create engagement, create good team dynamics, ensure everyone is belonging and everyone is being taken care of. And for various circumstances that we will discuss in the episode, you reach to a point where you need to remove someone from this dynamic. And it's super hard. It's very painful for you. It's even more painful for them, potentially. So this is going to be a difficult topic. I would say it's good that it's difficult. Dealing with people should be hard, and making the decision and executing the decision that you let someone go should be hard. It's rightfully difficult. So I thought we should just go around the aspects of what can lead to a termination and more importantly, how to handle it when it happens. I'm relying on my experience and the few firings I had to do, but I expect you, Jeremy, also to chime in with questions and share your thoughts so we can keep this dynamic.
Okay.
I was thinking about 3 parts on this to think about this structured. The first part, I want to talk a bit about making the decision, everything that leads up to this decision of letting someone go. The second part, I want to talk about the conversation itself when you announce it to the person and all the preparation that you need to do before you go into a talk like this, so you ensure it's efficient and less painful for everyone and less frustrating. And then we can talk a little bit about the aftermath, what happens after you did the talk. Yeah, let's jump into it. What do you say?
Sounds good to me. I would say to folks who, if you think that this is challenging and awful and hard and all the rest, it's probably a sign that you care about people, which is a good sign that you're a good manager, and you have to actually handle the situation really well. So hopefully what we talk about today helps you face these situations in a better way. So
that's a great thought. Thanks for adding that. The fact that you feel horrible is a good sign when you need to do this.
Yeah, if you enjoy doing this, you're probably not a great manager.
Please don't be a manager if you enjoy firing people.
Yeah. So
all right.
Yeah, let's talk about the decision then, Peter.
Yeah, and I want to make a disclaimer, like this is a big topic and I want to separate 2 groups of scenarios based on how much input or how much control you have of this decision, because there is a big area of layoffs or terminations decided way above your managerial level. When I say you, I mean our listeners, the line managers, engineering managers, or managers listening to us. So if it's a company-wide layoff, if it's a closing of a department, you have less control on the decision. So because of this, I want to focus on areas where you have more control, because I think advice there can influence the impact you have on the person and on the situation. But still, I think even if you're executing a layoff, there are some advices that you can find useful in the talk part, because either way you will need to talk with the person.
Yeah, I think the lead up to the decision is very different in a layoff, because you may or may not be involved in the decision about who and so on.
Yeah.
But it's a very different process to arrive at this conversation between a downsizing, layoff, restructuring, compared to performance-based firing of someone.
Yeah, and actually this is a good segue to one of my first points about making the decision, that ideally this should be a very long process if it's a performance-based termination. And this is the big difference with layoffs, because layoffs usually come seemingly out of the blue. Like a lot of the layoffs are for various reasons that I don't want to get into, but they are executed in a way that is surprisingly fast for people who are not involved in the decision.
Depending on the country that you're in.
Yes. and this is a good disclaimer. This episode is going to be full of disclaimers, but because fortunately we have an international audience, there are areas where we cannot really give practical local advice because different jurisdictions have different labor laws, and some require more strict documentation processes, some require, as you say, a bigger of a notice in layoffs or even negotiations with some unions or government entities, and there are a lot of differences. But I want to focus on the performance-based termination because I think our listeners, like a first-time manager, this is what they struggle with the most: how to spot if somebody's underperforming and how to fire them,
Yeah.
basically.
And Peter, you said that you feel like it should be at the end of a long process, but what do you mean by long? Like, how long is long? Is that years,
No,
months,
no,
weeks?
I didn't.
Like in your
Well,
mind, when you say long, what does that mean?
in my mind, when I say long, and this is just a gut number or like a thumb rule, I would say like a quarter, something like this. That's, I think, like 3 months is probably a fair estimations. By long, I rather meant something like it's not a surprise for the employee that we reach this point, because this process, if it's and from now on, when I talk about firing someone, I'm going to talk about this performance-based aspect. And ideally, they get a lot of early warning signs. They got a lot of support from you, from the manager or peers, to try to close the performance gap and perform according to expectations. We tried everything what we could, and I will talk a bit about what we should try. And then we reached the point where we figured that it just doesn't worth dragging on too long. But you're right, that like where your question is leading is something that I see often, especially in less experienced managers, is that they are dragging out this process too long. And that's definitely a big risk. Mainly I want to step back. My theory is that underperformers have a bigger impact than just their own scope. They impact the team and they impact the organization also. And the longer this impact drags on, the bigger it is. Not just directly that less work is getting done and others need to pull more than their weight to keep up, but more importantly, they impact the organization because they show what is expected by management. They show that underperformance or bad behaviors are tolerated, and this lowers the bar of expectations for everyone. I saw in an organization that this, the failure of management of handling underperformance in a timely manner, this led to chasing away high performers because they saw that, oh, this organization tolerates this kind of behavior. I don't want to work here anymore. It just doesn't work for me. So definitely don't drag it too long. My point was more about don't make it a surprise for the employee. Give a lot of early and increasingly serious warnings to the employee that there are issues with their performance.
I think that's the key part of this is when you end up in the actual conversation, nobody should be surprised,
Yes.
And the employee should be fully aware of the consequences of not being able to turn around the situation, that it goes in a particular direction.
Yes.
Okay.
But we're still making the decision. We are not in the conversation yet. I strongly believe in the SBI framework, the situation, behavior, impact framework. This is about giving feedback, which is a topic that could justify its own episode. In brief, it means that you describe a situation where the underperformance happened or the bad behavior. You describe the situation, you describe the behavior of the person, and you show them its impact. For example, the developer was launching a new microservice. They neglected the company-enforced documentation about the minimum requirements for a new microservice around observability. And the impact was that because we didn't have monitoring on this service, when it went down, it caused an outage, and we only saw it after 4 hours. I don't know. The point of the SBI framework is that it's very objective, and it gives a very concrete help to the person to see what exactly was the problem and why it was a problem. So they are well equipped to address the problem and try to improve. And when to give this feedback, I say as soon as it makes sense. I believe in weekly one-on-ones with managers and employees. I hear a lot of managers saying, I don't have time for one-on-ones, or I don't have time for weekly one-on-ones. That's, you're shooting yourself on the foot if you deprioritize one-on-ones. I don't want to get too deep into this, but you ideally have regular one-on-ones with the person, but even if not, just schedule a quick catch-up call or grab them for a discussion in an office setting. The reason for keeping it close to the event is that it's recent, so the person can still understand why you're giving this feedback.
I would actually say, don't wait for your one-to-one to give feedback. When something happens, pull them aside privately in somewhere. Don't do it in front of anyone else. Give them the feedback then and there. The one-to-ones are more when you're addressing the macro view, the zoomed out view, their progress on their career, they're struggling to do their tasks or whatever. You can dive deeper into the coaching or mentoring approaches that you can apply to that. Certainly the one-to-ones, at a certain point, you need to have documented written feedback. Feedback isn't just verbal in these kind of cases where there's repeated long term, like several months of underperformance, especially when it's not related to personal situations and things like that. The one-to-one is where you can uncover if it's related to a personal situation. The one-to-one is also where you follow up in writing, because sometimes people don't fully get what you say, but you can be very articulate in the writing, regardless of your jurisdiction, because in some countries you should do it in writing. And just a little point, for example, even if you do it in writing in France, you should do it also in French. If you're...
Oh no, really?
Yeah, you do, yeah. So like, just make sure you understand. Yeah, make sure you understand. Those written notes are very important, depending on like the rules of the country and so on. So you need to know all the legal requirements of it. So
yeah,
the good news is that you have a lot of tools available to you now, I think, that make it a lot easier to do that. But I would basically maintain some kind of shared document with your employee where you have your agenda for your one-to-one, your notes, and certainly where you're in a performance situation, then you need to have a very structured notes. And I think as a manager, this is also something you cannot afford to be doing this kind of high touch with someone for a super long period of time. Not only does a low performance impact the other members of your team, it impacts you. It impacts your ability to support high performers in your team. So
there were a lot of good thoughts in that. Thank you for adding all the immediate feedback and doing it privately. It's also very wise advice. I would say what I typically see in less experienced managers is the trap of benefit of doubt. Like when they see some underperformance, they chalk it up to some personal reasons, or they say that, they're going to do better next week. It's just a little misstep. And oftentimes it is, but still you need to take this opportunity to give early feedback so the person has more chances to correct behavior. You don't give a chance to the bad behavior to solidify and become the norm. Yeah, early, direct, obvious feedback. I
think all of us fall into the benefit of doubt trap, no matter how experienced you are. Yeah. But the big crime is not giving the feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you're not signing their death note. It's just what it is. It's a feedback about a concrete behavior and to help them get out of this, like help them understand better what's expected.
Yeah.
But these feedbacks, they should be increasingly severe and there should, as you said, they might not understand it the same way as you intended to say it. So you should be explicit about where this path is leading, saying maybe not on the first one, but on the second, third one, depending on the gravity of the situation, that this is a serious performance issue. This can lead to performance management. And if the person cannot change their behavior, it can lead to separation. So they understand the consequences. Because sometimes I heard that, oh yeah, he told me that, but I thought it's just his opinion, something like this. And it should be clear why you're giving the feedback.
But I think that's the impact part of SBI. The impact should be very clear that your impact was this, but we also can't continue to support this kind of behavior. If you continue, this can lead to other consequences, even as far as losing your job here.
I mean, I wouldn't start with this on the first feedback, but if somebody does repeated stuff, then definitely.
At some point, the impact is going to go up.
Yeah, and there's a point where you reach the point of the famous performance improvement plan. Let's talk a bit about what is the PIP for people who didn't do it yet. It's a structured, documented approach as a last resort to try to improve somebody's performance. And there is importance in every aspect. That's why I said it slowly, because I was thinking about not missing anything. It's structured because it follows a very clear structures. It has goals or expectations that the person needs to deliver. It has a timeline by when they need to deliver. It has checkpoints. It's in writing. That's super important because you're at a point where I would say, regardless of legislation or country, you need some concrete proof of underperformance. And yeah, the whole thing has a timeline on it, because usually this take like, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, definitely not longer. The goal is to give a last resort, the last chance of the person to help. Now, a lot of companies use the PEEP as, there's a funny resolution of the abbreviation that goes like paid interview period, yeah. And some take it like that. Even companies, like there are companies who, if you're on a PIP, that's your way out.
It's a one-way
That's
street.
Yeah, it's a one way. And I hate it because that's lying. That's charade. I tell my managers that put a person on a PIP if you believe that they can make it, and behave during the PIP. Like, make sure you really believe in them. And that's the way you can honestly support them. The way I approach this, the goal is not to just document their mistakes so you can fire them easily. The goal is to improve their performance. That's how I like to look at PIPs.
I have a couple thoughts on this. The first thought is I think I agree with you that you can't manage people if you don't care about them and you genuinely want to help them succeed and you're invested in creating the conditions for their success. And a PIP is a very structured way to help someone understand what is the basic behaviors that they need to do to be successful or get to the basic level of what good looks like for their role. First thought on it, that is that the PIP definitely has some very clear milestones. And while it might be set for kind of, let's say, 4 weeks or something like that, I think if people are failing the PIP and early on, I think you can, depending on the jurisdiction and so on, you may be able to end it sooner because you don't have to go all the way. If you doesn't have to be a super long paid interview period. It can be very much focused on, hey, you know what? Last week you didn't make it. If you don't make it this week, I think it could be over. And then I think, just to your comment about if you wanting people to succeed, and so you give them a PIP, that's not always the case. In some places in the world, you're forced to do a PIP to be able to have the final conversation that we're going to talk about in a second. For example, in the UK, after you've worked for 2 years, you have to go through this kind of a structured process. If it's less than 2 years, you can fairly easily let someone go. And in France, for any job, you have to go through a lot of hoops to let someone go. In the US, you don't have to do any of this, and everyone's at will, and you can just have the conversation and they can walk out the door. And they can do that too. They can leave in the same way. So I think always work with the HR team. You're never going to be putting someone on a PIP on your own. That a PIP is something,
no, please don't do that.
You can't actually. A PIP is something you do with HR.
Yeah. And any advice we can give, maybe you can just flush them down the toilet if you have opposite advice from the HR, because they call the shots in your company and they take the legal responsibility also of what kind of advice they are giving you. I just wanted to add that it happens often. Well, maybe not often, but it happens that the person doesn't want to go through the PIP, and it's their right to refuse the PIP and say, okay, I want to quit then. Let's find a mutual agreement. I don't want to go through the awkward and sometimes humiliating process of a PIP. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this should be the case for even countries that have a strong documentation requirement, because at this point it's a mutual agreement of termination. So there are not many.
And by the way, this is the interesting or important thing I wanted to call out is, to your point again about wanting people to succeed on a PIP. If you know deep down this person, it's just a formal process to go to the end, start with a proposal of a mutual separation. This conversation that we're about to talk about, have that earlier and just say, listen, I think we're coming to the end of the road, etc. Where, you have the conversation in a different way. Offer them the separation and say, otherwise we're going to have to go down this other path. And it may result in the same thing. The difference for an employee is mutual separation may give them a better deal than if they were just terminated. Their employment was
Yeah.
terminated. So I think I would say just save everybody a lot of time. If you think it's not working for someone, to find a way, work with the HR to just go for the mutual separation upfront.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is actually the solution to my dilemma about having to do a PIP when you don't believe in it. This is how you can keep your character, be a transparent person, like coming through in the beginning saying that, honestly, I think the performance gap is so big that I would be surprised if you could make it in such a short time,
Yeah.
but I want to give you a chance. But also, if you agree, then there is this other path.
And I would, and just on this, you are not going to have this conversation yourself without having either an HR person
Yes.
advising you, or even maybe handling the conversation. But
Yeah.
and if the person does say, no, I want to stay, then be extra cautious, work very, very closely with HR. You're almost in constant contact with them. It's going to be an onerous thing to handle, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you need to stay a good manager and a good person, but you also, part of your job is to protect the interest of the company. And this can, depending on what you say, especially, or what you put in writing, you can open room for litigation. But I think we went a bit away from the subject. These are very important points, and thanks for adding the very important role of HR in this process. But let's move on to the conversation.
Exactly.
I think, just to summarize, you made a decision, you want to terminate this person. There is no other way around. You're just going to need to sit down with them and tell them that they don't have a work anymore. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that this sucks. As we said in the beginning, this is really difficult and it's really hard. But it's probably much harder on the other person. So one of the traps for less experienced managers is making this too much about themselves and not about the other person. And this can manifest in a lot of ways, like having difficulty staying composed in the talk, or trying to be overly defensive and argumentative about explaining the reasons, or a lot of other ways. No, this is hard, and you should have all the help. You should acknowledge your feelings and expect your feelings. But this is about the other person who you're firing now.
At this stage, I think this is not a long conversation.
No, yeah, let's talk about the preparation. You're right. There are a few things that worked out well for me, and I think are good knowledge is that you need to know all the reasons why you're terminating. Don't start to come up with ideas on the spot. Definitely talk with HR and your manager about all the technicalities, like notice period, severance package, what happens with stock options, what happens with healthcare coverage, all these important aspects, so you're not surprised about their questions, which will probably come. And as you said, this is usually not a long call. Once you made the decision, you shouldn't drag on any longer. You made the decision, try to make the call as soon as possible, because you can keep secrets, but it's going to be visible on you if you gave up on the person. Just schedule it very, very shortly. Don't disturb them on their vacation, for example. Like if you made the decision while they are out, please don't call them on the vacation. Let them enjoy it as much as they can, because probably they see it coming. Don't send a schedule on Friday for a Monday morning because you're screwing their weekend. Just do an ad hoc call even, or grab them and say, do you have 10 minutes? We need to talk. Go to a very private place, either a one-on-one call where both of you are in a private place, or a private meeting room where people cannot see inside. And yeah, that's when you do the talk.
I think that's it's be prepared, even maintain empathy for that other person in how you schedule and line everything up.
And there is a useful mindset that I tell people who are struggling with this, that firing someone, it doesn't mean that they suck. It doesn't even mean that they suck at this job. It means that you couldn't give them a job that's appropriate for them. In fact, almost you failed in giving the job, or hiring them, or managing them, and everything through it. Yeah. It's a reverse mindset, and it helps resolve this inconvenience about telling someone that they failed.
I'm sorry, the compatibility, the way that this company works and what we expect from people is not a good fit. There's something else about this, which is, as you prepare and you have your reasons, the most damaging thing you can do, and some of the regrets I have of having done this badly or seen it done badly in orgs that I've been part of, is where you make something up that's not entirely fair or true as part of your reasons. And I think that can often come out specifically in a layoff situation, which is more of a surprise. I mean, this conversation in the end, you can arrive at it much faster in a layoff situation. And I think it's just better to say less than to say too much or too much of the wrong thing. I don't know.
Yeah. No, you're that's a very good point. Like if, for example, if you have the gut feeling that you just cannot work with this person because the way they behave, the way they talk with others is unacceptable, say that. Don't come up with technical things. Don't come up with other excuses. Stay true to yourself, because this is how you help the person to show what was the exact problem with the behavior.
Right. We've scheduled the meeting. We're
Yeah.
going in. We handle that.
Yeah. I mean, just like rip the band-aid off. Have one sentence prepared, something like, I'm sorry to inform you that your employment is terminated at this company, or we don't have a job for you anymore. Don't go overly explaining, as we talked about it before. It shouldn't be a surprise for the person. Still is going to be for some, but say very briefly the performance reasons, and then just give them a little bit of time to process, say the technicalities. They can have various reactions. Some people I see were shocked, and definitely some people are going to be emotional. You can be emotional. Try to stay composed, but this is a very emotional discussion. You can expect negotiation attempts, something like, oh my God, I didn't know it's that serious. Give me another chance. I was going through a divorce and it's over now and I'm in a better shape. Please help me.
Suddenly they come out with some personal thing that they didn't tell you about the whole.
Yeah. Or even if you knew about this, like sometimes you really want to emphasize, like you're emphasizing with the person, maybe they're in a shitty situation. But the important thing is, if you're not 100% sure in your decision, then don't go into the talk. The point when you're doing the talk, all discussions, all options are out. There is literally nothing you can hear at this point that should change your mind. So if the person is in a bad situation, figure out if you can give them some slack for a week or two before doing the decision. At this point, the decision is made. But oftentimes they just react being quiet and sad and processing. And this is normal. Give them some time. You can offer I mean, after telling the details about the separation, notice period, everything, you can offer them to leave. That's why it's good to schedule these calls around the end of the workday or even Friday afternoons. I don't know if the company allow them to take a cab for company cost because maybe they are not fit to do public transport. I don't know. There can be a lot of reactions. I guess the main point is, as you said, be empathic. But don't open any rooms for negotiation. Like, make it 100% clear that this is a done deal.
I think it's basically just don't get dragged back into back and forward. Repeat yourself and say, I'm sorry, but this is final. And would you like to hear what the next steps are?
Yeah. Or I can give you some time to process and we can go through these tomorrow or next week or
whatever. If it was me, I wouldn't say that. I would say, okay, I know this is really hard for you now. What I can do is I can walk you through the next steps and I'll send some of this in writing to you as well.
That's a good point.
I'm not going to go back and forward on this. This is the last meeting. After it's a handoff to HR and that's it,
That's fair. No, you're right. There can be things that you cannot answer on the spot, especially if you didn't do all your homework in preparation, but maybe there are something like they have a complicated question about vesting period for their options or
then
something.
It's like we can
commit to follow up.
We'll follow up with that.
But
that's it.
Don't apologize. That's one of the things that can happen in especially in layoff situations. If you use the mindset that it was not their fault, it was the job that you offered them. Still, you're not apologizing. It gives them a disservice because it leaves a little bit of doubt in their heads that maybe this could be changed. It's harder to gain closure in this situation if you're at the other side of the table, if the person is too apologizing. And also don't be defensive. Like this is not the point where you need to argue and prove your decision. Your role as a manager is to make decisions. You made a decision. You made the decision based on everything that you worked on in the last few weeks or months.
Yeah, I think this is not a long conversation. This is like 5-10 minutes. There's no, as you say, it's ripping the Band-Aid off. There's empathy in your voice. The main thing I would say beyond preparing in terms of like all the facts and your script and what you're going to say. It's actually feeling empathy inside yourself for the other person and how you deliver the words. If you're feeling inside yourself, like this goes back to radical candor and the approach to like how you're seeing a person. If that's there, I think that comes across even when you're delivering a fairly scripted delivery of what you're going to do.
Yes, no, you're totally right. And I thank you for mentioning one of my favorite books on giving feedback to people and talking with people. So you had the conversation. What happens after? I want to talk briefly about a few aspects, especially regarding the team. I like to give, especially if it's not a brutal case like gross misconduct or some even criminal cases. We didn't talk about that, but those are more straightforward. But usually I like to give the person some kind of control in how the announcement goes to the immediate team. I like to let them decide how they prefer, and I can do some adjusting in my plans. But the same thing is true. Don't drag it too long. Make it quick. Being in this limbo is impacting the team and the morale. Everyone, stick to the facts. If you're doing the announcement, don't go into performance details. You need to protect the privacy of the person, and nobody likes to be advertised how they're failed in various aspects. If it was a performance-based issue, probably the rest of the team also suspect because they saw the person performing. But if somebody insists, you can say that you would protect their privacy also, so you're not going to go into details. It's also important to address that this is not a part of an organized layoff.
I think there's two parts to this. There's agreeing a message with the person in preserving their dignity, not dragging them through, I fired them because they were useless, etc., etc. But I do think that there's two levels of communication. There's a communication that you need to, you often have like some kind of communication to managers. And they say, just want to let all the managers know this person will be leaving us. It's probably a private communication. In there, I think you should be very clear. We separated because we've been working on their performance for a number of months. It hasn't improved. And so we are separating with this person. I think that managers need to understand that there's a performance culture in this organization.
Oh, yeah, you mean this is for the managers'
It's not managers
message.
to repeat the message to their team, but it's for managers to understand.
No, I agree.
But then obviously within the team, you want to have a more public communication and say, depending on like this person's contribution, tenure, and so on, you want something. At the end, it might just be super short. I just want to let you know so-and-so is leaving. This is the end date. Here's the plan. Yeah. It might be longer depending on their role and everything else. But you need to communicate timeline and impact. And my personal view is that you should always communicate when someone's leaving. I think the worst is when people leave without any acknowledgement. Before you communicate, have your plan of what you're doing. What's the next step? Like, how are we covering their departure? Inside the team or in a, whatever, like have a plan, communicate part of it or say, interim period, this is what's happening. I will communicate a follow-up when we have a better idea. In my opinion, the communications happen super quick. You may agree with that person. You're going to tell a couple people this morning, and I'm going to send out a message this afternoon. Actually, you've been here for a little while.
Yeah.
Maybe, you're going to send out a message. Yeah. And we agree what that message is, and then you post it. Definitely loop in the HR team. Yeah,
but your point is that this is part of the preparation, actually. You do this before the talk. You already have the message, everything, so you can execute this very briefly. Yeah. On the process, you need to ensure knowledge transfer and see how it impacts your commitments on the planning, so others relying on your team can count with something. It's okay not to have all the answers. You just need to be reliable. And I think that's it. Anything I missed?
Well, there's so much more, and we probably have a number of other episodes. Yeah. I think we mixed the layoff with the performance conversation, the final performance conversation. We should probably talk about the feedback part and all the rest. Yeah. Do you want to summarize this in one sentence for us, Peter?
I like this saying that hire slow, fire fast. There are a lot of stuff I could say that are not true with it, especially on the hiring part maybe. But this is the deal. Like, you have an urge inside to oversee some mistakes because you want to avoid the conflict and avoid the awkwardness and avoid the hard parts. Don't do it. Come to a conclusion and execute it humanely and as much staying as a good manager as you can.
Well, thanks for this topic, Peter. Thanks
for your comment. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, sometimes we like to have our little disagreements, and I think it brings a bit to this topic.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you folks for listening. Hit the buttons, that whatever feeds, whatever algorithms out there, it always helps us. But ultimately what we care about is that you get some value, and if you know someone that might be going through something like this, please do share this with them.
Thank you all. Talk to you soon, or hear you soon, or talk to you soon.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Take care. Bye.